Marvelous.
They felt it in everywhere, in a lot of places in India also. Yeah, I'm not sure. Very big one, 1,000 people died.
Yes.
Oh, they've got it to 1,000 now. It was 876 earlier.
Probably
More than that? More than that?
They
Oh.
were thinking because it took a lot of little villages,
Ah.
which they can't even get to yet.
You have to pray.
Yes.
Do you want to have a shake
Yeah, can do that. ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः शान्तिः शान्तिः. So amanaha, that which is without what?
Mind.
Without mind. And we know when you say this, you kind of cringe. Without mind means, you know, you imagine drooling from the side. Mindless means what, you know? Yeah. But you know, there is intelligence without the mind. That we have to see. There is knowledge without the mind. And even if we see, we are not able to see the knowledge, we are able to see the intelligence. Things that don't have, for example, see, and also the other problem with us is that we associated mind with brain. This is wrong. This is downright wrong. It should be illegal to associate mind with brain. Because, you know, even at the level of the cells, they have intelligence. They don't have, you know, they're not associated with the brain cells. You know, we are talking of, let's even say, you know, liver cells, kidney cells, other organs that you know, cells that make up these organs. They have intelligence. That's why you can, you know, you can make things in test tubes, you can grow the liver. They are doing this right now. You can grow the liver so that you can have your own liver back, all healthy, without the alcohol, you know. That's what you can have if you need a transplant. They are trying to do this now. And they have successfully grown the ear, because the ear is such a complex, you know, not the inner ear, but the outer ear, so complex. It has so much cartilage and muscles and all these things, and so very difficult to make it. But thanks to this understanding, thanks to the scientists understanding that there is intelligence, they are able to grow the ear. In fact, they grew the ear on this man's hand and harvested it and put it where it belongs, you know. And so like this, they are able to do this because every cell has intelligence. Everything has intelligence, you know. The brain is just a medium for that intelligence, for that knowledge to come out as intelligence, to express itself. Plants have intelligence. Oh my God, so much. The plant life, if you see how they adapt to various things. There is a particular Ficus religiosa, a peepal tree, not P-E-O-P-L-E, no. Peepal tree, it's a holy tree in India. And that has learned to grow without soil. It has adapted, because there is a lot of erosion, and also it's a very hardy tree, and it gets pollinated very easily. One bird going above drops it in the crevice of a building, concrete, and there is just a crack. There is a photo somewhere on the internet. I don't Google right now, but where they have shown this tree coming in between these two, in the cracks of this building. It has pushed the walls of the building, so, but some rooms on either side cannot be occupied, but it hasn't destroyed the building, and it's basically just living on air. So like these plants have intelligence, when to face the sun, when to face away from the sun, when to bloom, when to go in dormancy, how to adapt to new environments. They have so much intelligence, and that's all knowledge, and that's all knowledge without the brain. And similarly, you can imagine the knowledge without the mind, which includes the brain, the emotions, the intellect, and the I notion. So in fact, that knowledge is actually quote unquote pure, in the sense that it is undifferentiated into knower and known. In me, which when I say me, the brain, this body mind sense complex endowed me, I also have knowledge, correct? And what is this knowledge? Always split into subject object, except when I am asleep, but then it doesn't matter, because I'm not there to enjoy this. So this knowledge that is not split into subject object is whole, is limitless, whereas we only experience embodied, we experience a splintered version of this knowledge, because always in relation to the known there are so many things I don't know. In relation to the knower there are so many things that are unknown. So like this, I daily experience this splintering of the knower and the known. But what I don't know, I'm also experiencing that knowledge, before the splintering. I'm experiencing that, because of which this splintering takes place, that as though I'm experiencing that too. Because when I say I am, there is no splintering. You see, I am. When I say I am, I know I exist. Again, there is no splintering, because the I is the subject, the I is the object. There is no splintering whatsoever. So you see, there is this general kind of a chorus of this knowledge. I am, now, I am, now I am. I now am. That now, that nowness and that amness, which is experienced constantly, becomes the backdrop, the screen for which this knowledge, to take on the status of the knower and the known. So behind this, you can't even say behind, but you are constrained to. So behind every discrete cognition is that knowledge, which is all knowledge without knower known. Just like behind every wave, what backs up the wave is water. So you have one wave, knower, another wave, object of knowledge, one wave, subject of knowledge. What is in common with both of them, and what is the refrain, is that which is free of knower and known. When I say I am, I see that, even though I am the object and I am the subject, there is no splintering at all, because it's the same subject and object. And similarly, when I say I see this pot, I can also experience it the same way I experience myself if I have this cognitive shift and I see that what is this pot? Clay. What is this clay? Earth. What is this earth? Nothing but a projection of me, just like the air, the five elements. Everything has come out of me. This is what the next mantra is going to say. And all this is myself alone. It just takes a few more steps of understanding, if one is able to if one is able to play with this, one can go very far. Further, Adi Shankara tells us that in negating the mind, you are negating all action, because the mind becomes the precursor of all action. So you are negating the capacity for action, you are negating all the sense organs, because the mind powers the sense organs. You are also negating, he says, the sense objects, because the sense organs exist in relation to the sense objects. So all these are negated in one fell swoop. Just like by negating the possibility of birth for the Atma, we have negated what? Every other modification. Here too, by negating the prana, the vital life force, you are negating capacity for action. Without prana there is no action, without prana there is no and without mind, this prana and manaha too should be taken together, Adi Shankara says, because without prana and mind there is no action, there is no possibility of desiring, there is no possibility of coming to wrong conclusions, there are no sense organs, and because the mind powers the sense organs, the pranas also power the sense organs to function, and without the mind and prana, no sense organs, no sense objects, no thinking, no indecision, no grudges, no fever, no tumor, nothing. Optimal physical and mental health without a physique. Okay? So, this is what he says. The Sanskrit is indeed very terse, so that's why I have already translated it right away. He really is picking up like this. So, he says, तथा अमनाः अनेक ज्ञान शक्ति भेदवत् संकल्पाद्यात्मकं मनः अपि अविद्यमानं यस्मिन् सः अयम् अमनाः अप्राणो हि अमनः च इति प्राणादि वायुभेदाः कर्मेन्द्रियाणि तद् विषयाश्च तथा च बुद्धिमनसि बुद्धीन्द्रियाणि तद् विषयाश्च प्रतिषिद्धाः वेदितव्याः. You must know. What must you know? You must know that by just disengaging means what? Disengaging the Atma from the possibility of being endowed with mind and prana, you are negating all these things. You are negating the organs of action, you are negating the possibility of being the Atma being an actor, you are negating the sense organs, you are negating the sense objects, you are negating buddhi, intelligence, as it is manifest through a particular aperture. So knowledge, when it goes through a particular aperture, can be called intelligence. Here that is also negated, because the knowledge is all knowledge, undifferentiated, without needing to get to a status of the knower, without needing to have a mind to express that knowledge, because in fact it is expressed everywhere all at once, effortlessly. In fact, it powers all the minds without itself needing to be having a mind, needing to be mindful. So that is what it says. And then tatha shrutyantare dhyayati iva lelayati iva iti. So he gives another example. Shrutyantare means in another shruti, in another Upanishad. Which Upanishad? Brihadaranyaka, I think. So in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, there is a statement, Atma meditates. Atma meditates? On what? If you meditate, you can meditate on Shiva or on something. If Atma meditates, what is it going to meditate on? Of course, itself. Okay. But why will it meditate? No. Atma is not meditating. I am meditating on myself. I am contemplating on myself. So what do I do when I am contemplating? I close all the drapes, turn off all the lights, and then put a no disturb sign on the door, and then sit. And then what? Do pranayama first, alternate nostril breathing, and sit. Shut the eyes tightly. Then I said, no, I shouldn't shut them tightly. Okay, loosen up a little bit. But then nonetheless, I am a serious meditator. Right? Or I do japa with the hand. I tell the beads. Serious meditator. That's what I tell the beads. I'm just meditating. And then what? Somebody ignores the don't disturb sign on the door and knocks. You want breakfast? And you feel like saying, no, go away. But even if you say, no, go away, and somebody has already entered the meditation, correct? Yeah. What has gone away is not the person who knocked on the door, but what? You have gone as a meditator. The meditator has departed, correct? And then you say, all right, since the meditation is already broken, why not have breakfast and then come and sit down to meditate? What happens when you meditate after a brunch? Yeah? Yeah. Some nice sounds come in the meditation. Right? Yeah. So, sleeping sounds. So therefore, you don't, you have already, you feel like, okay, since I'm already disturbed, let me just go have breakfast. At least they have made breakfast, that's good. And if I don't go, from tomorrow they may not make. So I should just go. So saying this, you go join the breakfast. What happened here? You got distracted, correct? So what were you doing at first? Meditating. Then what happened? You got distracted. So this dhyayati, what is that? Meditates. Lelayati, gets distracted. Undulates. Literally, lelayati means undulates. Yeah. Dhyayati, meditates, and then another, let's say, gets back to meditation. A thought comes. Oh, did I wash the dishes after breakfast? Lelayati, the thought itself makes the meditator undulate from that erect, posture, mentally erect, physically erect, completely, this posture that is donned for the meditation, is gone. The person becomes like Lord Krishna, undulating. And then some nice thoughts come, undulates, and then gets back to meditation. Dhyayati, lelayati, dhyayati, lelayati, dhyayati. What is this dhyanam? If there is so much lela and lelayanam, what is this dhyanam? In fact, what is this dhyanam without lelayanam? This lela has to be there for it to be called dhyanam in a way. Otherwise, it's not meditation. Meditation is when you bring back the mind from where it has been distracted. Why are we going into this? Because that other Shruti was quoted. Yeah. Otherwise, why do you think we'll talk about this? So the other Upanishad says, Dhyayati lelayati, all right, but really speaking, that is for the mind. Mind dhyayati, correct? What is the mind doing? Now the mind is focused. Focus. Yes. Single-minded focus. Samadhanam. Okay. Then what happened? To the best of my knowledge, even though I focused, it went out of focus. Lelayati, out of focus, correct? So the whole day this is what the mind does. As I multitask, the mind comes into focus, goes out of focus, comes into focus, goes out of focus, in, out. This is my life, this is my mind. But think of the Atma without a mind. No focus, no out of focus. No focus, that's terrible. Now, why is it terrible to not have focus? It's terrible because you have a little pale, dim-wit mind. Compared to all knowledge, this mind that has been crafted out of this all knowledge is just a small little pale, sometimes off, mostly off, sometimes on, little firing thing. Yeah, like that glowworm, in the dark it just once in a while goes like this. So like this, the mind is just a pale imitation of this all knowledge. it is interesting because this pale imitation called the mind becomes a receptacle for this all knowledge to shine, thankfully, because this all knowledge is already I. So the self-shining I is recognized as such. It has nothing to do with the mind. The mind is just a placeholder, that's all. It's just a place where this knowledge occurs. It's not the agent of this knowledge. So this knowledge is, so the mind is trying to meditate and the mind goes out of focus. The knowledge is always is. The knowledge is neither needs to focus. Who needs to focus? The one who is distracted. So if the knowledge is all knowledge, it is not dispersed, it is not distracted, why should it focus? So that's the one nice thing about self-knowledge. You never need to meditate again. Yeah. You never need to meditate because you're never distracted. You are with whatever there is at any given time in the now. See the benefits of self-knowledge? Yeah. No more japa, no more tapas. Tapas means not Spanish snacks, okay? Yeah, that is also called tapas. Yeah, very unfortunate. But tapas here means any kind of religious, spiritual disciplines and austerities that one does. No need for them at all. Why? No distraction. Therefore, no focus. So the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad says that actually the person is neither meditating nor out of focus nor distracted. Why? Because the person is as though meditating and as though distracted, because the person is all knowledge without the mind. So the mind is not given away, the mind is transcended cognitively to understand that which makes me anxious. When I cognize that anxiety, I am already not identified with the mind. When I cognize the sorrow, I am already not identified with the mind. When I cognize the stress, I am already not identified with it. I am in the place of the observer that brings everything to light. The tears, the fears, the focus, the out of focus. So very beautiful. When Adi Shankara quotes, we have to take it seriously. Very beautiful and apt quote. Very apt. Dhyayati iva lelayati iva shrutyantare. Very nice. Then, yeah, firefly. I said glowworm. Same thing, yeah. So, then we have Brihadaranyaka Upanishad 437 for those who want to look it up. Yasmat cha evam pratisiddha upadhi dvayah tasmat shubhrah shuddha. So because it doesn't have a mind and because it doesn't have prana, there is no dushanam. Dushanam means any kind of bad things coming into the picture. Dosha, fallacies. There are no problems. Because if there is a mind, there is retardation. If there is a mind, there is developmental problems, ADD. If there is a mind, there is what else that thing happens? What is that thing called? Anxiety, stress. And if there is a mind, of course, there are this couple, yours truly. What are they? Raga, Dvesha. Here, no mind means no raga, no dvesha. No sankalpa, no vikalpa, no indecisions, no fears, no tears, no wrong thoughts about oneself, no wrong thoughts about others, no subjectivity, total lack of subjectivity, total absence of subjectivity. Amanaha. Then this upadhi dvaya pratishedhat, through these two kinds of upadhis being negated. What are the two upadhis? Prana and mana being negated. You have to see that there is no possibility for wrong things to come into the picture. What are the wrong things? Wrong thoughts, wrong ideas. And also prana is negated, so no fever, no tumor, no accident, no incident, nothing. All is well, apranaha, amanaha. So both of these are negated. Ataha This is again a little difficult, so I'm going to just read it by myself. Ataha aksharat namarupa bija upadhi lakshita swarupat sarva karya karana बीजत्वेन उपलक्ष्यमाणत्वात् परं तद् उपाधि लक्षणम् अव्याकृत आख्यम् अक्षरं सर्वविकारेभ्यः तस्मात् परतः अक्षरात् परः निरुपाधिकः पुरुषः इति अर्थः. Yeah, so in that he has packed up the whole thing that we discussed last week. So he says, Adi Shankara here says, some very straightforwardly he says, therefore, since it is free of all this, it is called Shubhraha, the next word in the verse. Divyaha, we finished. Amurtaha, we finished. Purushaha, we finished. Bahyabhyantaraha, we finished. Ajaha, we finished. Apranaha, Amanaha, we finished. Next one what? Shubhraha. So Shubhraha, why is it Shubhraha? Because it is Apranaha and Amanaha. Because it is not subject to the vitiations of the life force and like indigestion, fever, tumor, or the vitiations of the mind like raga, dvesha, jealousy, etc. So that's why it is Shuddha. So that finished. Now he is going to take up the last one. Hi aksharat parataha paraha. So he says that ataha aksharat nama rupa bija upalakshita swarupat. So first akshara, there are two aksharat, right? Aksharat parataf paraha. So there are two aksharas because one akshara is the one that we talked about much earlier, the indeclinable self. But here that akshara, as I pointed out last week, does not mean what is talked about here, because this is saying that which is akshara, indeclinable, but which is better and higher than this indeclinable. So when you say higher, then the indeclinable is no longer indeclinable, it has declined because there is something higher than that, correct? So why is this akshara, Maya Shakti, the power to differentiate and the power to project, the power to conceal, why is it called indeclinable? Because it is always there. We saw this last week. It is always there, albeit in a causal form, but it is always there even when there is not a cycle of creation. Even when there is not a cycle of creation, that intelligence, that Shakti is there. And that Shakti is what? Unmanifest. From unmanifest it becomes manifest, and then it creates, and in the process of this Maya creating, Maya takes on the very form of everything that it creates. So we make a differentiation between the two kinds of causalities attributed to Brahman. One is Parinami Karanam, which is Maya, that which undergoes a change. Definitely, in becoming the leaf and the tree and everything, there is one aspect of that causality that undergoes a change. It is called Parinami. And then Brahman is called Vivarta Karanam. Vivarta means Vividham Vartate, that which enters into everything without becoming any one thing. So that is all that is pointed out here. That which is called the bija, that which is the root, the root of everything is Maya, that the two limiting, so the two things here, one is higher, parataha, aksharat paraha, as compared with the other. So both are indeclinable, imperishable. One is called the unmanifest, Maya, and the nature of this Maya is inferred because it is what makes Brahman into a creator, gives Brahman the status of being a creator. Yeah.
This is like Mahavakya.
This is Mahavakya, that's what I told you. It is definitely a Mahavakya because the word Purusha is there. Yeah. Even though that's not the intent right away to give the Mahavakya, the Upanishad is constrained because Upanishad cannot give this knowledge in any other way other than the form of the Mahavakya. Yeah, that is all it is. When the Upanishad teaches, it is always Mahavakya. This is definitely a Mahavakya. So here, that is what it said. The word Purusha makes it a Mahavakya. We discussed this last time. So because that same Purusha is the I which is, so to speak, sleeping in the body mind sense complex, and the I that pervades the universe. It's the same I. So this Brahman also, I have a limiting adjunct. What is this limiting adjunct? The body mind sense complex called Upadhi. Even Brahman has a Upadhi. What is that? Maya is the Upadhi. Maya becomes the adjunct for Brahman. Why? Maya becomes the container or that which gives the status of the creator to this Brahman. Otherwise, Brahman does not act, Brahman does not create, cannot create. Because of Maya, it gets a new status. Just like after getting married, one gets a new status. I am the husband, I am the wife. Before that, there was no status like that. So, likewise, so this Maya is nothing but Brahman, but it is a power, and as though power that gives Brahman, bestows upon Brahman the status of creator, and bestows upon me the status of what? Ignorant. Ignorant one, ignorant of my own nature. So like this, so this is what is Maya, because it is in the form of the seed. It appears as the seed of all Namarupas. Namarupa Bijatmakam. And then what else? And the other one, which is Brahman, which is the higher imperishable, according to the translation here. No higher or lower, but the other one is better. The other one, Para here is taken as higher, I suppose. Para here we should actually talk of absolute. Itself is unconditioned. Itself is unconditioned. Itself is free of all modifications. Sarva vikarebhyah, free of all modifications. And then what? Free of all effects and accessories of creation. It is as though creating, it is not really creating. So this unconditioned, all pervasive entity is called, Brahman, is called Paraha, Aksharaha. And what does it mean? It is unconditioned, without upadhi. It doesn't have a body or a mind or a senses. It also doesn't have it is not equipped with the power to create. Here, that power to create was given by Maya, and that Maya is inferred because the creation is in the seed form sometimes and creation is manifest at other times. So that unmanifest is also called Akshara because it is never comes to an end. But we are talking of that power which is only manifest in the form when there is creation. But when there is no creation, that all knowledge, all presence, unconditioned by any name or form, is you, and this is what it is called Brahman, Aksharaha, Aksharat Parataha, Aksharat Paraha, like this it is called. Then he gives he then returns to the problem at hand. What is the problem at hand? The problem at hand is merely this. How can I see that this entity that was just revealed to me as the truth of myself doesn't need to breathe in order to be alive? I come back to that problem because it seems a little fanciful, and so Adi Shankara touches upon it again in the last portion of this Bhashya, the commentary, and then it's also going to be the first portion of introducing the next mantra. It's not only the conclusion for this, it serves as the introduction or the connection for the next one, next mantra. So, Yasmin tad akashakhyam aksharam samvyavahara vishayam otam protam cha katham punaha apranadimatvam tasya iti uchyate. He asks a question. He says, that which is all pervasive, that which is higher than the highest, that which is all knowledge, which is all existence, which has permeated the whole universe and has appeared to take on the forms of the various things in the universe without itself taking, without itself having any particular form to call its own. How can that entity, that conscious being, be a prana? How can that not need to, how can that be a prana? And I'll tell you why he asked this question, because we don't see that entity. Do we see that entity that is free of needing to breathe? No. Do we encounter it and can you shake it by the hand? No. You don't see that entity. How do you know this entity? Through the Upanishad. First of all, this entity is self-revealing, so you know I am. And then the nature of this entity as being the cause of the universe, you know from the Upanishad. From the words of the Upanishad, you understand this is what it is. But then when the words of the Upanishads are talked about, what do they say? That everything that has form and everything that has name is itself alone. That is what they would say, correct? But then everything that has name and form is also happening to breathe. Happens to have the life force. You look at the glowworm, breathing or not? Yes, check. Look at the cockroach, they breathe through the sides of the body. Okay, check. And then you look at the earthworm, breathing? Yes. You look at the fish, glub, glub, glub? Yes, breathing through the gills and bubbles. Some way they are respirating. Check. You look at the birds? Yes, check. And not just breathing, even things that don't appear to breathe, like moss, fungus, etc. They are also having certain, a kind of an exchange. They are having that. Trees, they are also breathing without really breathing. And even if something doesn't breathe, all the other pranic functions, digestion, elimination, circulation, something or the other is going on in all things that are sentient. So if I am to look at Brahman, in all things that are sentient, I only encounter these breathing entities. And then yet you tell me that this is aprana. How is it possible? This is his question. This is a very interesting question, because whatever I encounter happens to have the life force. And here you say that it doesn't have prana. How am I to take that? And then the answer is given. He explains very interestingly. यदि हि प्राणादयः प्रागुत्पत्तेः पुरुषः इव स्वेन आत्मना सन्ति, तदा पुरुषस्य प्राणादिना विद्यमानेन प्राणादिमत्वं भवेत्, न तु प्राणादयः प्रागुत्पत्तेः पुरुषः इव स्वेन आत्मना सन्ति, तदा अतः अप्राणादिमान् परः पुरुषः, यथा अनुत्पन्ने पुत्रे अपुत्रो देवदत्तः इति. So he says here, very interesting, he says that if the prana, if the prana, the life force, what you call the life force, here not just respiration, if by the prana we mean the life force, if the purusha exists, if the purusha, if the prana exists like the purusha before creation, then you can say that there is a competition which is more, purusha or prana. Purusha here means the entity that we are talking about, the conscious entity which is all pervasive and fills up everything with its existence and presence. So if this, we said that this is not subject to birth, correct? So then if prana also has the same status, then we have this problem of how, everything that we see is breathing. So how come Purusha is beyond prana? Then we have that problem if the prana had also the same status as the Purusha. But the prana was not seen, Purusha alone was. Prana is not there. Prana also comes later. How do we know? Wait till you read the next mantra. Prana also comes later. Prana is subject to birth. Prana is subject to, collapsing into itself, into the entity. Prana is something that is a part of the creation. Prana is created. The entity is uncreated. So therefore, you cannot say that this prana, although everything that I encounter is just a manifestation of that entity alone, which is myself, that conscious being alone. I cannot say that the conscious being only is breathing in every body. No, the conscious being doesn't need to breathe. But I only encounter a breathing, respiring conscious being. That means what? That means that I am confused by this otam protam, by the as though association of that conscious entity into all things, sentient, insentient, everything, etc. That conscious being pervading everything is as though mixed up in those entities, leading me to the wrong conclusion that the conscious entity, the conscious being, Purusha, needs to respire, needs to digest the food, needs to run around, no, needs to frolic. No. None of this is needed at all. What is needed here is to understand that the prana is not, pre-existing the Purusha. That is all we have to see. Prana is not there. The prana itself is a product. The respiration is a product made possible by what? Air. So the air is a product made possible by what? Because of the 5 elements. The 5 elements themselves are a product of Brahman. And if you look at the other Upanishad, Taittiriya, Tasmad va etasmat atmana akashas sambhutah akashad vayuhu vayoragnihi agnerapah adbhyah prithvi prithivya oshadhayah. We saw the whole thing. All the 5 elements are a manifestation of this I alone. This Purusha, this one that fills up everything, which is also known as the truth of I, this is alone there, nothing else exists. So all the other things come afterwards. So therefore, you cannot say that my way of understanding the conscious being is to look at the existence of everything, and when I look at the existence of everything, that everything is mixed up in this conscious entity, so that it appears that though the conscious entity needs to breathe, but that is not the case. The prana is denied for the conscious entity because the prana is not pre-existing the Purusha, or it's not simultaneously co-existing the Purusha either. So what is this prana? Prana has also come out of Purusha. The next mantra is going to say. So therefore, so Brahman is without prana. Just like, Devadatta, aputro Devadatta. Till the son is born, you say sonless Devadatta. Devadatta is a name. So one fellow who doesn't have a son, you say offspringless Devadatta. So like this, you have to see the entity as a prana, because the prana is not yet born. That is the whole idea. That's why this example of the sun is given. Yeah, very nice. So that concludes. I really wanted to finish this today, and because this bhashya was taking so long, and then we'll chant the next one and leave it here, pick it up tomorrow. Etasmat jayate pranaha
Etasmajayate pranaha
manas sarvendriyani cha
Manasarvendriyani cha
Manasarvendriyani cha
Manasarvendriyani cha
Khambhayujyotirapah
Khambhayujyotirapah
Prithvi vishvasya dharini Prithvi vishvasya dharini. Together. Etasmat jayate pranaha manas sarvendriyani cha Khambhayujyotirapah Prithvi vishvasya dharini. So here it talks of how the 5 elements which we see as indestructible has also come from this Purusha alone. So we'll see this tomorrow. Very nice. And then it continues like that. So the first 2 mantras are important because that talks about the 2 standpoints of what is that? Swarupa, one's own being, and the tatastha in relation to the creation. So both those things are talked about. So that's why the first two mantras took a lot of time. Now we hope to go a little faster now that you've got the hang of it. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om. Any questions are there? Now afternoon there is class at 4 o'clock, Bhagavad Gita. What verse are we on? Nobody knows? Yeah, you can email me. Yeah.